Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Welcome back, everybody. The Bacon and Egg Show, episode 68, November 11th, 2021. Jay, what is going on in the world of bizarre news this week?
You know, I think some people might call it bizarre. Some people might call it, I don't know, hard nose, whatever. But
Well, it wasn't another animal bite. We know that.
No, luckily
that we know
not.
of, at
luckily
least.
There wasn't. Well, not that got out anyway. It's very possible with any of these programs right now. But yeah, no, man, everything's good. Beautiful day outside. Happy Veterans Day.
Yep.
Got a couple of things to get into here, but man, you want to start with with maybe some of the best, what it was intended when it got out to do harm, I feel, but it's turned into a really interesting point, I would say, in this coach's tenure.
Yes, and we're not talking about Gia the monkey getting out of the cage. We're talking about a video getting out of one of the assistant coaches on the Texas staff, Bo Davis, basically just laying into the team after the Iowa State debacle. And yeah, like you said, it almost seems like there was an ill intent with this video leaking. One of the players, still yet to be revealed who this was, although I have a feeling it will reveal itself. But Bo Davis is being a hard-nosed coach. He's obviously passionate about it. And if you haven't seen the video, it's out there. Go see it. He's showing some passion. I mean, but yeah, basically a player on the team was filming this with his cell phone. And yeah, I'd imagine, like you said, the intent was probably to like, oh, look at this guy, like, trying to, I don't know, trying to cancel him or something like that. And
yeah, exactly.
It's had the exact opposite effect.
Yeah, I mean, and I said this offline to you, man. I feel like this is a pivotal moment in Steve Sarkisian's tenure as a coach. I felt like it was important to lead with that. And this is one of those things where it's an example of the culture that we've been describing on our show, and that anybody that's been paying attention at all can see that there's still dysfunction on this roster. And there is this sense of sort of entitlement, I feel, that hey, we're at Texas, we've made it to this far, and this is who it hasn't panned out that way, obviously, in the last 12 years. And we keep bringing up that number. I say that number all the time because it's really been that long since, Texas is still considered a blue blood, but it's not like anybody around the country really takes this football program seriously at this point. And for there to be a moment where a coach actually shows that passion, like, hey, this is what it's going to take to be around. You're either going to be a part of this, which, if you've been on a bus after a tough loss, there's sort of a like the decorum, I guess, is, I don't know if that's where I was going with that, but you're not cutting up on the bus after getting your ass whooped like that. I think it's just sort of the read the room, and the fact that there's nobody on that roster that's stepping up and handling it themselves and saying, hey guys, like, we just got our ass kicked. Let's quit around with the joking around on the ride home. That's the issue. The fact that the coach had to get up and do it himself is probably what pissed him off so much. And I think it's great. I think it's pivotal moment in this tenure, in this hire, and it's the kind of coach you want to have on. And I think there's a lot of people saying, like, yeah, I want to be coached that way. These recruits want to be coached.
Yeah, we've seen some of their commits, actually. And I was going to say, like, the reaction has been interesting to see it throughout the different levels of this. You've had most of the fans and most of the people that follow the program go, God, it's about like, this guy feels the same way we do. He's cursing them out the same way we do when we're watching on TV or we're in the stadium. Like, there's a coach that shows some passion. Then you have the current players You've seen a number of them, notably one of them, Xavier Worthy, changing his Twitter profile picture to Bo Davis's like headshot from the like media guide or whatever. And like you see these different players coming out in support of it. Whittington was another guy that was vocally supportive of Bo Davis. So you're seeing these players kind of rally, not all of them, a segment at least of players rallying around Bo Davis. Then you have the ex-players that are coming out and going like, why, hey, that's what this team needs. But it seems like Quan Cosby, Rod Babers, a number of ex-players have come out and said, where are the players doing this? Like that's the difference between those teams that were winning games and being competitive for trophies and the last 12 years. Where is the leadership? Where are the players on the team that are the ones cursing them out on the bus? The coaches shouldn't have to do it. But then you also see this reaction of like, oh, well, it's out of line or whatever. And that's just coming from people that apparently have never played a team sport at any kind of competitive level. And like, if you haven't heard those words in a locker room from a coach, then you most likely never played football, let alone any kind of like, I mean, come on. It's quit the pearl clutching kind of thing.
There's an appropriate time for that language. And, like it's like when David Ortiz, after the bombing in Boston of the Boston Marathon, and David Ortiz on like local television, like in a passionate moment, he says, this is our effing city, but this is our fucking city,
yeah,
or whatever, and it's like, there's a moment where you hear, there's a moment when you hear that word, and you need to be able to explain to your kids why that's a good usage of when to use that word. And I'm not saying cussing at kids is the way to go, but when you feel like that passion, when you feel it's coming from a place of like, man, like I want this so bad, and I want you to want it as badly as I do. And if that's what it's going to take for us to overcome the things that this program needs to overcome, and just know that the way that you're handling this right now as a player is not going to get us there. It's bigger than you as a player. This program is about something more than that. And that's what you had when Texas was competing for national championships, was winning 10 plus games for a while, for a decade. Those are the types of guys that you had, the ones that were willing to want it as badly as Bo Davis wants it. And I think there's, like I said, for those that are like really trying to, we got Wally's making an appearance there. Excuse me.
He agrees.
But Wally agrees wholeheartedly with the fact that Bo Davis was warranted in making that rant. And I think it's the right guy at the right time to send the right message. And I think recruits are going to love to see that. And some of them have already shown, and I think it's going to pay dividends. Honestly, I think this couldn't have come at a better time, to be honest. Why not? You're 4-5. What do you got to lose?
4-game losing streak.
Yeah. What are you going to do about it? Like, it's like the people that are satisfied with that are the reason why this is a 4-5 football team at this point.
And at the end of the day, we talk about the people that are kind of taking offense to this. This isn't high school football. This isn't Pop Warner. This isn't middle school. This isn't, beer league, like recreational. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's a lot of salaries on the line. There's a lot of livelihoods on the line. And for a lot of these players, this is the end of the road of their football career. And whether, they want to extend that career or not by trying to get to the NFL, I think that's kind of the gist of all this right here. When Bo Davis in that rant saying this isn't a game, for a lot of these players, it's not. A lot of these players are coming out of, disadvantaged backgrounds. There's family that's relying on them to get to the league. There's so many levels at play here that it's really not a game. Are they playing a game? Sure. But this is a business. And there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of livelihoods and a lot of futures involved here. And that includes Bo Davis and his family. Yep. He said it on there. He didn't say you got your asses kicked. He said, I got my ass kicked out there today. And like, But that's what it is. If someone can't, oh, well, he shouldn't have been, some players don't respond well to that. Well, then maybe they should, like Bo Davis said, get in the portal.
And I
And
know we want to get to basketball, but I just want to make the point that, like, if you don't fully understand what comes with being a football player at the University of Texas, then don't come play here. I think that's the message that's being sent right now by this coaching staff, with Steve Sarkisian addressing it head on and just being like, he said what he said. Like, this is what happened, and this is what's, this is basically, like, just know that that's the expectation if you're going to come play football here, that it's going to be expected that you want it as badly as we do as coaches. And if you don't, then
see ya.
Don't come or don't stay.
Yeah.
Message sent.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see how they respond against the Jayhawks Saturday, which we won't even get into that. Let's save that for what could, however, we're going to discuss that game next week. Anyway, let's get on to a more positive sports experience. Jay, you and I were fortunate enough to be in attendance Tuesday night for the Runnin Horns opener against Houston Baptist. Let's take a few minutes here and just, if you want to kind of recap what we witnessed there and just kind of the broad sense before we get into what's coming up on Saturday.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say, give that shout out to Chris Del Conte, running into him on the concourse there, getting the vote of confidence that this program's gonna go the way this thing's gonna go the way that
should have invited him on the show.
I should have. That's when we got to get those business cards made so I could just.
With the handshake, you just slip it right in the hand with the handshake and just walk away, kind of thing.
Yeah.
He sees it. Man. He goes, bacon and egg show, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Next time. But no, that's just really a piece of the experience that night. Being able to, they had all the cool posters, they had the team cards, they had the general admission for you to. The lower bowl was packed, man. It was a really great environment. And something that I feel like is going to be carried over into this season, even in some of these games where, this pre-conference schedule outside of this big game, there's a couple of matchups that are really going to be entertaining, but the rest of these should be tune-ups for this team really figuring out who they are and getting ready for a really tough Big 12 conference. But what I'd say about the on-court stuff that went down the other night is that it was as advertised. This team is athletic. You mentioned it instantly, man. Look at the length on this team. They're just long,
and they can move. That's what stood out to me is, like, you can see teams that have a lot of length, but they don't move the way that these guys move. The way that they can run the court and they're agile and all those things. Like, it's impressive to watch.
Yeah, and there were times where you can tell that there's people still second guessing their role. A lot of these guys are used to being the best player on the team. It's like the jump that you make from high school when you're the best player on your team to college when it's everybody's best player. Well, now we've got this experience to where you've got all of this, what Chris Beard has basically assembled an all-star team, except most all-star teams play like 1 or 2 games with each other max, depending on the level. And now you're expected to play 30 plus games, 40 games with these guys that you haven't ever played with before. And this is high and you're expected to play at a very high level. So the fact that they were still able to find ways to get it done, to not look back. There was a point where I looked at you and I said, okay, they have this lead now. Time for them to never look back. And then and it happened from so many different guys that contributed. I think, the most important, not the most important, but the most impressive performance to me came from Courtney Ramey, which to me speaks volumes in terms of there being different guys at any given time that can take over and totally change the way that a game that this team has played or is playing. And Ramey looked fast. He looked like a willing defender. He looked like very comfortable knowing that the space that was provided. Yes,
he looked confident in his role.
Yep, absolutely, and it really showed. And he was he was just one of many guys, Kerry, that were impressed, that impressed us there from the view there at the drum, shutting the last season at the drum, and they're making sure everybody knows, Kerry, that it's the last season at the drum. They're really pushing that, just to like anybody's gonna miss that place.
Yeah, I should have got one of the T-shirts, the Good Riddance tour of the Irwin Center. We were joking in there when we walked in about that popcorn smell that just permeates throughout the entire building, and how once they knock that thing down and build more of the med school facilities, they're still going to smell that popcorn and air conditioning smell, like up on the 8th floor of whatever building goes in there. But it's the Irwin Center. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I it's hard for me to find anybody I wasn't impressed with. I think even, we talked about Timmy Allen, how wasn't his best night. He seems like he's a guy that's still trying to figure out that role a little bit. But what was encouraging about it, and this might not have like translated on TV, was he'd make a mistake. He'd put the ball on the floor. There'd be a turnover somewhere, and immediately Beard's bringing him off. His rotation game that night was, in every single whistle, it seemed like someone was getting rotated. But he was always, he'd bring Timmy Allen off, and he was coaching him every single time on the bench. And Beard is just, we were discussing this in the building, that he does not stop. He's constantly coaching. He's coaching who's on the bench. He's yelling out on the court. He's in tune with every single thing that's going on. But what I liked about, even though Allen didn't have the best night, after that coaching up, he'd get rotated back in. He'd respond to it. You'd see the mistakes being corrected. You'd see, and without losing his confidence either. He wasn't shying away from being involved in the game.
Right.
And that's what's encouraging for me, is that Beard's not going to let these guys on an individual basis, if they're turning the ball over, if they're making mistakes. You mentioned earlier in the game, there was on offense, nobody was moving around. There were a couple possessions where they just weren't moving around. Next whistle, full rotation. Get them off the court. Coaches them up. They come back in. What do you know? That's when Texas starts to pull away in the first half. But that's what really stood out to me, was this is going to be a process. And with the talent that's on this roster, as these guys start to figure out how they can play with each other against real competition, the coaching aspect is going to be so crucial. We're going to see, if this is going to be one of those situations where the team that we see for the first quarter of this season is going to be absolutely nothing like what we see towards the end, because of that coaching. The talent is there, but he's just going to fine tune it and know how to dial in with each one of these guys to get them to respond. And that's what we saw. Houston Baptist isn't, not a great opponent, but you saw they handled business. They were professional about it, and they played until the end of the game. If that's what we're going to get on a week in, week out basis, Texas isn't going to go undefeated by any means.
Right.
But if that's what we're going to see on a weekly basis, they're going to be in everything. They're going to be in every game. This is not, I don't see this being a team that's just going to with 10 minutes left in the game, just we're out of it. We're done. Beard won't let them do that. There's no way. No. So yeah, it was an encouraging night. But it gets real quick. This Saturday night, a trip to go play the number 1 team in the nation, the national runner-up, Gonzaga. And what do you make of this matchup, man? This is, number 5 versus number 1, if the polls hold as we get into Saturday. But can you ask for a better test? I think Beard mentioned it this week. He goes, no matter what, we're coming out winners, regardless of the scoreline Saturday, because we know what we've got. And we know where we measure ourselves at against the number 1 team in the country coming out of Saturday. Is that how you're kind of viewing this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see just as many rotations against Gonzaga as we did in the first game. I think that this is all by design. Like you said, we're going to he's going to see against some of the best talent in the country who works
experienced
well with
talent
each
too.
other. Exactly. Who works well with each other in these types of situations? Who can rely on what's going to be the best chemistry, I guess I should say. Who can rely on who can, who works well under pressure in high pressure situations against that environment is going to be off the charts.
Yeah,
for
for
this
sure.
game tomorrow night on Saturday. This is and Beard, well, he has been, very well. We'll get whatever we get out of this is great, but he is hyping this matchup up because he understands that if Texas is going to be in that conversation again for and being considered one of the better programs in the country, or at least consistently, being a consistent contender, that it's going to take matchups like Gonzaga and coming and fighting until the end, whether or not they win this game, just having that fight until the end. And with this team is talented enough on paper to hang with Gonzaga, but there's just such a great team effort that you're going to get out of the Zags. That is what's going to make this tough. And if Texas can't go, I mentioned to you at one point, Texas was 7 for 12 from threes.
Yeah.
At half, and I said if they were 3 for 12, and if they're 3 for 12 against Gonzaga, then that's, I feel like, going to be a test for them to have to be able to find a way to stick in that game in other ways. And luckily, with the way that this offense was spread around, we talk about Trey Mitchell, who at halftime was scoreless.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Instantly.
then it was like, we were like, man, it would be nice to get Mitchell involved. And then before we knew it, he was in double figures. And just like that, it was a really great example of them being able to find a player, let them put their skill set to work, and, drive the offense in a way to get you through a certain period of the game. Because good teams find ways to have multiple people carry you through different stretches, where you don't have to rely on your superstar to get you to. These guys are all superstars.
Well, and even like on top of that, how nice is it to see some kind of halftime adjustment?
Absolutely.
In terms of, we were talking about it in the first half when they're making these threes, but there wasn't much of a post game offensively. And we're talking about like, all right, this is great. We're running away from this game. They're hitting the threes, the shots are falling, but with the length and the size that there is with this team, like I want to see more of this team get low and get inside and get some buckets that way. And that's exactly to your point. They go in at halftime, and I guarantee that's what Beard and all that they look at, they go, we need to start getting inside more. Because they know that. They know that like the threes aren't going to fall every game. And that's exactly what they did. And Mitchell has himself a good night in response to that. And that's where, again, it just gives me confidence that, I mean, it's so refreshing, right? How many times over the last few years have we watched games, you go, adjust at halftime, and there wasn't.
Yeah.
I hate bringing this one up because I want to move on from it. But like the Abilene Christian one's a perfect example of that. With the size that Texas had up front, why weren't they going down low and just bullying Abilene Christian in the post? There was no adjustment to that. And if you trade the coaches, I'd like to think Chris Beard would have made an adjustment in that game and gone that direction. And that's kind of what we saw against Houston Baptist, as a way to just get this team and some experience and get them flowing and connecting with that type of offense. And yeah, Gonzaga is going to be a hell of a test. I have no clue where to even begin thinking how this game's going to turn out, because we just don't know. We don't know what this team looks like. We don't have enough of a sample size to see what they look like together. And we're going to see, God, how many players you think we're going to see for Texas play that night? 9?
At least.
You think about if this team had been together for 2 to 3 years, you're probably going to go up to Gonzaga and go, this is like our 7-man rotation that we're sticking with.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case right now.
Maybe 8.
Maybe 8.
But with as many guys that he wants to get minutes in this big time situation, we didn't even talk about Marcus Carr yet, who's really going to be the driving force behind this team. And
I think they kept the brakes on Carr a little bit. We mentioned it. There were a lot of times where he had looks that he just pulled back and opted to distribute. I think they're keeping him under wraps a little bit, honestly.
Yeah, I think they're keeping his usage down early in the season. I think there's a cognizant effort for that. And it may change in this Gonzaga environment, because he may be needed more to be more assertive, to be more selfish, to be honest, and to get his shot. But the thing about it is even with him, if he's not all on it, Andrew Jones played well. Christian Bishop is getting, he started, but he didn't carry the majority of the minutes. He had a really good night. Allen will be better. But for me, it was seeing Jace Febris.
Yep.
Looking like Jace Febris needed to look, and seeing Devin Askew being willing to be coached and make adjustments. And he had 4 assists. He didn't
in
score
limited
the ball
time
a ton,
too,
but he had
and
4
his
assists.
shot looked good.
Yeah.
He
Like,
drove
so
the hoop a couple times. Like, Askew looked really nice.
Yeah, and that's somebody again that's going to be receptive to coaching and find a way to figure out what his skill set's going to allow him to do best in this team, because his minutes will be limited this year, and it's like almost like an apprenticeship to learn under some of these guys that have played at such a high level in other conferences, to then come here and then to sort of learn and be around that level of practice every day. You can't help but get better. And the talent's there with Askew. It's just a matter of putting some of these pieces together and figuring out his game at the collegiate level. And that's somebody that I'm really excited to watch progress as the season goes on, is to see where his game goes from, sharpens that knife. Iron sharpens iron and all that stuff, and I feel like he'll be one of those guys that by the end of the season will be giving good minutes, even if they're limited. He'll be a solid contributor
And a guy that we'd be looking at for next
conference.
season, going like,
yeah,
you're losing Ramey, you're losing Febris and Jones and all that. Okay, Askew, Carr, but Askew's a guy that can probably step in and be a starter next year on what is going to probably be another really good team. And so you can already see that, start to develop. But
yeah.
Well, Jay, we got a short one today.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Saturday's going to be an interesting day on both fronts, football and basketball.
Chet Holmgren is a very talented player. There's a reason he was the #1 recruit in the country, and he's going to be a tough matchup against any team. So we'll see how these bigs play down low, how they decide, if they decide to attack him, go right after him, or sort of rely on that outside shooting. Gonzaga did not have a good night shooting threes the other night in their opener. So Texas gave up 17 offensive rebounds, which is way too many. And that's going to be something that'll have to change if they expect to be in this Gonzaga game. But it's going to be a great matchup, and I can't wait to see it. And thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, appreciate everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks, y'all.
ATX represent Fatal, baby.